Hi, and welcome to this introductory video to the online conference Histories of Tacit Cinematic Knowledge. My name is Rebecca Boguska, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Frankfurt-based graduate research training program Configurations of Film. During the past 3 years, Configurations of Film provided a group of PhD students with the opportunity to exchange with postdoctoral fellows, principal investigators, and international visiting scholars. The Histories of Tacit Cinematic Knowledge Conference is the result of the shared effort of the scholarly network to find a common framework for a wide range of research projects, engaging with different forms, formats, and localizations of configurations of film. It is also the closing conference, or in German, die Abschlusstagung of the first cohort of PhD candidates. Now, my colleagues Guilherme Machado, Rebecca Puchta, Marin, Reljic, and Philipp Röding will share with you some thoughts on how we came up with the idea for this conference.
Hi, and welcome to a virtual seat on the Frankfurt campus. My name is Rebecca Puchta. I'm a PhD student in the Configurations of Film Research Training program, and in my PhD project, I'm engaging with the question how documentary since the Snowden revelations in 2013 produces knowledge. That Histories of Tacit Cinematic Knowledge has now become the title for our final conference seems to me no surprise, because as a group, me and my colleagues, we have discussed the notion of tacitness unintentionally for the first time in 2018 with our Mercator fellow Marie-Aude, who introduced to us Eric Ketteler's text with the title Tacit Narratives, the Meaning of Archives. In this text, Eric Ketteler wonders how to engage with archives and where to look at when an archive is rather determined by what will have been archived in the future. A discussion which points towards the historical dimension of tacit cinematic knowledge also. The rephrasing of Ketteler's question then was subject to our conference Why Don't You Look Somewhere Else that was held in summer 2019. During this event, the idea of distraction became also a way to engage with an object, to follow other film objects, and it has redirected our engagement with film into the context of its usages, its practices, its methods. Histories of Tacit Cinematic Knowledge now provides a framework in historical, theoretical, and methodological terms that allows to deal with the multitude of film studies projects that can be located at the relation between knowledge production and the management of non-knowledge. Even much earlier than Michael Polanyi has introduced and discussed the tacit dimension of knowledge, Gilbert Ryle has spoken about the difference between knowing how and knowing that. Especially in economic theory, this active dimension of knowledge has been made productive, particularly then when processes wanted to be understood, when implicit knowledge has been rendered explicit. That means visualized, materialized, standardized, and formalized in order to share knowledge and to make it accessible for value creation. What has been theorized as unconscious foreknowledge or embodied knowledge in film studies and cultural studies points to this active dimension of knowledge, what is included in terms such as know-how, knowing, practical skills, or active knowledge, as the Italian economist Enzo Rolani proposes. Looking at this difference, we might meet the challenge that data and knowledge economies now represent, and that mobilize moving images for knowledge extractions, thinking of data visualizations, fMRI, slide detection software, and other diagnostics of all sorts, as well as the use of moving images in the stock exchange, or the use of body scan technologies at all checkpoints of all sorts. I think that tacit cinematic knowledge most recently allows to discuss a shift of the epistemic itself in the making, and I understand it to be the answer to a problem that arises from the concept of knowledge itself, which adheres to a definable, measurable, documented, and often closed understanding of knowledge. I have come to this thought also when reading James Bridle's work New Dark Age, in which Bridle argues that we are facing vast repositories of knowledge due to new technologies, digitization, and data, and that we, just because of this increase, have to learn about unknowing knowing. Viewed in this way, making explicit what seems to be tacit is only one facet of this problem that we can discuss in our conference. but rather we are also interested in the questions of how we deal with the help of film and through film with the fact that the world became and still becomes more and more tacit, which is why I consider film and moving images to being able to most likely remedy this embarrassment that we face just because every day we have to rely on and trust in the tacit cinematic knowledge that is embodied and practiced through ourselves, as well as the moving image technologies surrounding us. I'm very much looking forward to our discussions and to your thoughts on that subject.
Hello, everyone. My name is Guilherme, and like my fellow organizers of this conference, I'm a PhD candidate in the Configurations of Film group. So, why histories of tacit cinematic knowledge? I think there are two aspects of this expression that might be interesting to point out by way of introduction. These aspects appeared in the way we have been using this expression of tacit cinematic knowledge in our discussions during the preparation of this conference. Tacit knowledge was, at the beginning of our discussions, a concept that we borrowed from Michael Polanyi in his epistemological writings. But very early on, we somehow left Polanyi aside. And I think maybe because the notion that we extracted from his concept, the notion of tacit cinematic knowledge, maybe this notion had for us a suggestive significance for its own. And we actually started to use this notion quite often, also in relation to our individual researches, and especially to affirm our research in the field of film studies. So actually, it seems to me that this notion has been useful for us to legitimate our unusual objects of research as part of film studies. And this is the first aspect of the term I would like to point out. Tacit cinematic knowledge has been a way to claim the legitimacy of our interest as film scholars in objects of research that are not commonly understood as having much to do with film. In my case, for example, and in my personal research, I consider that I'm studying tacit cinematic knowledge when I'm investigating, for example, the way workers today promote themselves in social networks, or the way managers write about the use of videos in corporate meetings to instill productive performance, or the way educators deal with visual techniques in schools to produce contents for professional guidance, for example. I think a lot of what is commonly considered as film theory has been also practiced by educators and corporate managers, for example. And I'm certainly not the first one to study these questions. But what these people do, what these corporate managers and educators do, and mostly without knowing it, is to produce concepts and conceptual frames to guide the uses of visual techniques. And what is perhaps most interesting is that corporate managers not only produce film theory, but they also reproduce ideals and beliefs that were pretty common to film theories of the 20th century, for example. And again, they do it mostly without knowing it. They do it mostly without knowing film theories, for example. So this is the second aspect of the term tacit cinematic knowledge that is interesting from my point of view. It evokes the idea that cinema might be something that is not visible, that is implicit in our daily practices and discourse. So for me, tacit cinematic knowledge is not just about the multiplication of cameras and screens. I think film practices have been interfering in the way we conceive education, labor organization, medicine, warfare, and so on. And I feel that perhaps the task of film research is also to make explicit the way film, which is a political practice par excellence, is the way film is somehow discreetly and secretly shaping our knowledge and our cultures. So these were the two aspects I wanted to point out to begin our reflection on tacit cinematic knowledge, and I look very much forward to see what are your takes on this question.
Hello, my name is Marin Reljic, and I'm the musicologist in our research group. and I'm investigating contemporary music for classical silent cinema. First of all, from my perspective, the perception of conventional cinematic dramaturgies goes hand in hand with auditory codes that by nature can only be seen with the ears. Thus, they are tacitly embedded into the visually perceived information and also can configure this information. This is, of course, a pretty obvious determination of tacit qualities in canonical narration that can be decoded by, for example, analyzing film music. But there is also another approach to sound. The overall cognition of sonic environments as an epistemological key to frame knowledge has grown to this day in the bright field of sound studies in various research areas. Between this fine margin of filmic techniques and scientific research of acoustic and lexicality, there is a growing appeal that I would like to phrase as the seemingly absence of acoustic reception. However, this absence has allowed an important series of investigations of visuality in contemporary media discourses. Therefore, audio data is an integral part of many modern fields of investigation. Acoustic semiotics in different fields of research will be explored also in various presentations of our conference, like the fetal ultrasound images, images of the cosmos, whose soundless fluidity is also part of sonic responses to previously sent signals, or to phrase it the other way around, where the setting is phrasing the acoustics, the spectacle soundscape of urbanity. I'm looking forward to it.
Hi, I'm Philipp. I'm part of the committee that organized this conference and also one of the members of the research collective. I'm filming this with my smartphone from my home office at around 10:30 in the morning, and as you might be able to make out from the curtain, it's going to be a sunny day here in Frankfurt. So as part of this little introduction, we were all tasked with pondering the question of why tacit cinematic knowledge. And I think, at least for me, the answer to that question has something to do with the ideas that form the basis of our collective. As you might know, this conference concludes 3 years of collective research, and during these 3 years, one observation tended to come up every so often, which was, this is all nice and well what you're doing, but what has all of it to do with film studies? And I guess this is where the concept of tacit cinematic knowledge comes in handy. As you all know, Polanyi is very interested in what he calls hunches, in the suspicion that there might be, quote, something there to be discovered, end quote. And for Polanyi, this anticipation of discovery is a very personal notion, and I think during the past 3 years, all members of our group have had these hunches multiple times. In my own case, most of these hunches revolved around skyscraper observation decks and how they make use of the moving image to transform the view of the city. I guess my first impression was that there is something inherently cinematic about these installations, although for quite some time I had no idea what I meant by that. That is, I was, quote, committed to the conviction that there is something there to be discovered, end quote, and that something had to do with moving images, at least in the broader sense. Very curious now to find out how our presenters responded to this idea, and what I've seen so far looks very, very promising. So in that sense, I wish us all a delightful online conference.
And now let me go over to a few organizational points. The Histories of Tacit Cinematic Knowledge online conference is divided into 2 sections. The first section consists of pre-recorded videos of the panelists and keynote speakers' presentation. You will find these videos, the speaker's abstract, and bios on our homepage. The second section consists of live discussion with the conference contributors, which will take place from September 24th to September 26th, live via Zoom. In order to receive the links to this discussion and further information about the modalities, please register on our website until the 20th of this month. We would like to take this opportunity to thank the contributors to our conference, our colleagues in the Configurations of Film Research Collective, and the administrative team. And thank you for listening in. We are looking forward to seeing you online.